I'd just cut off the main road into the HOA neighborhood. No heads up, no sign, just a locked gate and a whole lot of chaos. Karen, the HOA president, was hammering on my front gate like it owed her money, her face redder than a Texas sunset. Behind her, a crowd of residents milled about, confused and freaking out, shouting, "You can't do this. You're stranding an entire community." I leaned against my porch railing, arms crossed, cool as a morning breeze, and said, "This road's on my land. Karen, you shouldn't have tried to claim it." Her hands shook as she yanked out her phone, snarling, "I'm calling 911, this is illegal." I just smiled, slow and steady, and said, "Go right ahead," because every bit of this was legal, and I had the receipts to prove it. Let me rewind to how we got Hera-blocked road. A furious HOA president, cops on the way, and a neighborhood in a panic. I'm Adam Whitmore, a 43-year-old divorced dad with a college-aged daughter, living a quiet life on a 12-acre ranch I inherited from my late uncle. This Texas land, tucked just outside a sprawling suburban development, has been in my family for nearly a century. Generations of Whitmores ran cattle, mended fences, and laid loved ones to rest here. When my uncle passed, I left Dallas to take over, working remotely as a software developer and spending my mornings riding the range, tending to a small herd of goats that keep me grounded. But that peace, it shattered the day I met Karen Langley, a 55-year-old firebrand with bleach blonde hair, ever-present pearls, and a tongue sharp enough to cut through steel. Which city of the United States are you watching from? Drop a comment and share with us if you have any confrontation with the HOA. Will narrate your story on our channel. Hills HOA, a gated community of McMansions built 5 years ago just across the road from my property line. Well, what they thought was their property line. You see, this is where things get tricky. There's a single paved road, Mapler Crest Drive, that connects their neighborhood to the main highway. But here's the kicker, that road runs through the edge of my ranch. Yes, I own the land beneath their road. The developers made a temporary easement agreement with my uncle, and when he died, that easement expired. But no one seemed to notice or care until I did. At first, I wasn't going to make a fuss. The road barely touched my land, and I figured live and let live. But things took a turn real fast when Karen started acting like she owned me. It started with a letter, "Dear Mr. Whitmore." It read in a font that screamed bossy PTA, "Mom. We noticed several unsightly structures and rusted vehicles on your land as part of our HOA beautification initiative. We request that you remove these eyes within 14 days, or we will be forced to report you to the county." I stared at the paper. Baffled, she was complaining about my barn, a barn that had been standing longer than her neighborhood existed. I chuckled, shook my head, and ignored it. A week later, a sheriff showed up. Apparently Karen had made a formal complaint, saying my land was lowering neighborhood property values. The deputy was polite, almost embarrassed. "Sir, I have to check it out, but this isn't HOA land, so this probably goes nowhere." It did go nowhere, but it planted a seed. Karen wanted control, and she didn't like being told no. Then came the real shock. 2 months later, I got a visit from the county clerk's office. Someone had filed a request to Rishoni, part of my land, claiming it had been misclassified and should belong to the Maple Hills HOA for community infrastructure. You guessed it, that someone was Karen now. I was mad. I hired a land use attorney named Stephanie Clean. Sharp, cool-headed and fierce. When she needed to be, we reviewed my deed. We pulled the expired easement. Stephanie smiled and said, "Mr. Whitmore, if you want to shut that road down today, you absolutely can. They've got no legal right to use it anymore." I didn't do it right away. I wanted to give them a chance. I drafted a polite letter to the HOA board explaining the situation and offered to negotiate a new easement for a small yearly fee. Of course, nothing extreme. Just fair compensation for the land they were using. Karen's response: she accused me of extortion. She stood at the neighborhood gate with a megaphone yelling about how I was trying to blackmail hard-working families and calling me a threat to the community. That's when I decided enough was enough. I gave them 30 days notice, signed and delivered. After that, the road was done, blocked, cut off. Of course they ignored it because Karen, in her little empire of matching fences and manicured lawns, believed I wouldn't go through with it. But I did. On a Friday morning at exactly 6 a.m., I hired a local construction crew. They brought in concrete barricades and heavy equipment in 3 hours. The only road connecting Maple Hills to the highway was blocked on my side. No warning, no back door. Out. Karen showed up 5 minutes later in a pink bathrobe and slippers, screaming so hard her voice cracked the neighborhood. Was trapped cars backed up. People came out of their homes with confused faces. One man yelled, "How are we supposed to get to work?" Another, "What about the kids' school?" I walked up to the edge of the road, calm and steady, my hands in my pockets. Karen stomped up to me like she was the sheriff of some Wild West town. "You have no idea who you're messing with." "Oh, I think I do," I said. "You're the woman who tried to steal my land. That road is ours." "Nope, it was a gift. That gift is over, and now you can talk to my lawyer." She turned redder than a ripe tomato, took out her phone and shouted into it, "I'm calling 911." And just like that, the cops were on their way. I knew this wasn't over, not by a long shot, because while the barricades were legal, the war was only just beginning. Now, let me ask, where are you watching from? Because trust me, you're going to want to stick around. This is just the beginning of what became the most talked about HOA meltdown in the county. The sirens wailed through the quiet morning like a bad omen. I stood near the edge of the barricaded road, arms crossed, watching the flashing red and blue lights get closer. A few HOA residents began recording with their phones. Karen's face was practically steaming. 3 sheriff's deputies pulled up just outside the concrete barriers. They looked tired. One of them stepped out, rubbed his eyes, and sighed. "Mr. Whitmore," Deputy Sanchez said, walking toward me, "got a few calls this morning about a blockade. Want to tell me what's going on?" I handed him the notice I'd served the HOA 30 days ago. I gave them a legal warning. The easement expired years ago. This land is mine. They refused to negotiate a new agreement, and I'm not letting them use it for free anymore. He took the papers, scanned them quickly, and motioned to his partner, a younger deputy named Rogers. "Looks pretty airtight," Sanchez muttered. "Karen, you got any paperwork that says this road belongs to the HOA?" Karen stomped over like a thundercloud in heels. "It's been used by the community for years. That makes it ours. It's common property." He's just a bitter old man trying to punish hard-working families. Rogers stepped between us. "Ma'am, that's not how property rights work. Continuous use doesn't grant ownership without a legal easement, and from what we see here, the easement expired." Karen's mouth fell open. "So you're not going to arrest him?" Sanchez looked unimpressed. "For what? Enforcing his own land rights?" Karen shrieked. "This is an emergency. people are trapped. Sanchez turned to the crowd. There's another exit through the old farm road behind your neighborhood. It's gravel, but it's usable. No one's trapped. Karen's jaw clenched. That road goes through the swampy backland. Our SUVs can't handle that. A voice from the crowd piped up, "Speak for yourself." Karen, I used that road last month to avoid traffic works. Fine if you don't drive. Like a lunatic, laughter rippled through the crowd. Karen shot daggers at the man who spoke. Then she turned back to me, eyes narrowing. "You think you've won, don't you?" I didn't answer. I just looked at her calmly and said, "You tried to take what wasn't yours. I'm not backing down." That night, a storm rolled in. Fitting, really, but it wasn't the weather that got intense. Around midnight, I heard the hum of a car engine near my property line. Then headlights flashed across my barn. My security cameras caught everything. A black SUV pulled up near the barricade. 2 people stepped out and tried to move the smaller concrete blocks. They didn't get far. They weren't strong enough, but they definitely tried. I called the sheriff again next morning. I sent the footage to Stephanie, my lawyer. She chuckled over the phone. "They're lucky they didn't damage anything, or you'd have grounds to sue." But I wasn't laughing, because things were getting serious now, and Stephanie warned me, when someone like Karen loses control, she doesn't go away, she goes underground. And she was right. 3 days later, I received a notice from the county zoning board. Someone had filed an emergency request to seize part of my land for public access. It was signed anonymously. But the language, all Karen. I was furious. I drove straight to the zoning office and asked to speak with the board. They were polite but distant. "There's been community pressure," one of them explained. "Some residents are worried about access. There's talk of eminent domain if you continue to block the road." "Eminent domain," I said, almost laughing. "You want to take my land for a rich neighborhood's convenience?" One of the board members sighed. "We're not making any decisions yet. You'll be invited to a public hearing." Stephanie was livid. "This is harassment. They're abusing legal tools to bully you. But don't worry. I've seen worse. We'll be ready." I tried to keep calm. I really did. But that night, something pushed me over the edge. I came back from a supply run and found tire tracks inside my ranch. Someone had cut the side fence and driven through my goat pasture. My animals were spooked. One had a limp. I reviewed the security footage again. Same SUV, same 2 figures. I sent the video to the sheriff. "We'll investigate," they said, but I knew they'd be slow. Karen had friends in town, friends who owed favors, so I made my own move. I hired 2 private security guards, retired military guys, quiet, professional, and firm. I posted signs, "Private property. No trespassing, violators will be prosecuted," and I added cameras, lots of them now. I was prepared, but the day of the public hearing came fast. The town hall was packed. Home members, lawyers, reporters, even curious townspeople filled the wooden benches. Karen arrived in a bright red suit, smiling like a politician on a parade float. She sat front and center, arms folded, flanked by HOA board members. I saw a couple of them whispering to her, passing folders. "Stephanie." And I sat near the front to calm, but ready. Then the hearing began. A commissioner read the case. A loud petitioner argues that Mr. Whitmore's refusal to grant road access constitutes a public safety hazard and obstructs community infrastructure. Recommendation: consider temporary land seizure. I stood when they called my name. I kept my voice calm but firm. This isn't about safety, it's about control. I offered a legal agreement. They refused. I gave notice. They ignored it. And now they want To steal what's mine, using bureaucracy. There were murmurs in the room. Some people nodded then. Karen stood. She was theatrical, as always. This man is putting families in danger, blocking emergency services. What if a fire breaks out? What if someone needs an ambulance? A woman from the back interrupted her. You had a chance to work with him. You chose war, Karen glared, but kept going. We demand the board act. In the interest of the people, take back the road. The board announced a recess to review both sides. Karen turned to me during the break. Enjoy your little win while it lasts, because next time, it won't be a hearing, it'll be a court order. I didn't answer her, but I felt the heat rising in my chest because I knew this wasn't just about property anymore. It was personal. And then the bombshell dropped. When the board returned, the lead commissioner cleared his throat and said, "We've reviewed the documents, the footage, and the timeline. At this time, we do not find grounds for land seizure." Gasps filled the room. Karen's mouth hung open, but then came the catch. However, we are granting the HOA 10 days to appeal to the state zoning office. If they can present new evidence, the case may be reopened. Stephanie leaned over and whispered, "It's not over yet. They'll use that time to dig." And dig they did, because 2 days later, I came home and found a certified letter on my doorstep. It was from a law firm representing the HOA, and it claimed that part of my deed was forged. They were trying to prove I didn't even own the land at all, and that was the beginning of something even bigger than I imagined. I held the letter in my hands for a long time before I even opened it. It was thick, heavy, the kind of envelope that doesn't just bring news, it brings war. I finally slid it open and pulled out the papers. There it was, in sharp black print: notice of challenge to property ownership, Maple Hills Homeowners Association. Versa Adam Whitmore. My heart sank. The letter claimed that the deed I held, which had been passed down from my uncle, contained a boundary error. The HOA's lawyers argued that during the last official land survey, a 1-2-acre portion, including the stretch where the Mapler Crest Road ran, was never formally conveyed during the estate transition. In plain English, they were saying I never legally inherited that part of the land. My hands trembled. I called Stephanie. Immediately, she was already reading the same thing. They're playing dirty. She said this is a classic HOA move. They dig up technicalities from old records, twist them around, and try to drag people through the mud until they either give up or go broke. I clenched my jaw. So what do? We fight. But first we get a copy of your uncle's original land survey and his will. I need to prove beyond a shadow of doubt that the land was passed to you legally. All of it. She paused. Adam, this could get ugly. This might go on for months. I looked out across the land. My goats grazed peacefully, unaware that lawyers in expensive suits were trying to erase their pasture from my name. I'm not backing down, I said. The next few days were a blur of paperwork and property records. Stephanie worked around the clock, pulling documents from the county archives, requesting the original will from my uncle's probate attorney, and hiring a private land surveyor to remark the boundaries. But even as we scrambled, Karen moved faster. She held a neighborhood emergency meeting that Friday, and she made sure the local news was there. The headline the next morning: HOA president claims rancher blocked community road with fake land claim. I was furious. The article was full of lies. Karen painted herself as a defender of innocent families. She called me a rogue land baron. She even implied I was running some kind of goat-based tax dodge. Who even writes this stuff? I muttered, tossing the paper across the room, but the damage was done. People in town started giving me strange looks at the gas station. Someone spray-painted HOA 1 Justice on my fence, and then my internet got cut. At first, I thought it was a glitch, but after hours on the phone with the service provider, I got the truth. Someone had submitted a formal disconnect request in my name, Karen. It had to be her. She was trying to isolate me. Stephanie called later that night. I just got the updated survey, she said, and the deed, your uncle. Signed Adam. Everything checks out. You own the land. Every inch of it. I felt like I could breathe again. Then we've got them. Not quite, she said carefully. Now we have to file a response. If we don't show up to that courtroom with every document signed, sealed and notarized, they'll twist this into an injunction. If they win, they can force you to reopen that road. I nodded slowly. So what's next? We file our counter, and then we go to court. The court date was set for 2 weeks later. In the meantime, Karen doubled down. She hired a PR firm to run community safety ads, painting me as a threat to children and emergency access. She even got a local pastor to speak at church about neighborly love being blocked by greed. But even while all that circus went on, something strange happened. People from the HOA started contacting me privately. The first was an older woman named Debbie. She lived 2 houses down from Karen and called me one morning just after sunrise. Mr. Whitmore, I just want you to know not everyone in the HOA supports this. I've lived here for 6 years, and you've never bothered anyone. Karen's she's power hungry. That's all. That one call turned into 3, then 5. A young man named Cole even knocked on my ranch gate. Hey, I just wanted to say I'm sorry about all this. My wife and I were ashamed of what's happening. Karen doesn't speak for everyone. I thanked them all, but I didn't fully trust it, not yet. And then on the night before the court hearing, someone broke into my barn. They didn't steal anything, but they trashed the place, kicked over feed buckets, slashed 2 sacks of grain, left a spray-painted message on the wall, opened the road, or else. I stood there in the darkness, the smell of paint still fresh. My fist clenched. Stephanie called the sheriff again. They came, took photos, and promised to look into it, but I wasn't hopeful. They were already walking on eggshells around Karen that night. I didn't sleep. I sat on the porch with a flashlight and my granddad's old hunting rifle, not because I was going to use it, but because I wanted anyone sneaking around to know. I was watching. Dawn broke quietly, and then it was court day. Stephanie picked me up early. She wore a sleek navy blue suit, calm as ever. I had my stack of documents, the land deed, the original survey, my uncle's will, photos of the barricade, even footage from my security cameras showing Karen yelling at workers. We walked into the courthouse. Karen was already there, in a silver dress suit, flanked by 2 lawyers and a smug grin that made my skin crawl. The judge was a man named Judge Rowley. He was known for being tough but fair. He called the case to order. Karen's lawyer stood first. Your Honor, we're here today to challenge the legitimacy of Mr. Whitmore's claim to the road leading into Maple Hills. We have reason to believe that. Stephanie cut in with a calm but firm voice. Your Honor, my client's deed is recorded, notarized, and backed by county archives. We have documentation proving the road was part of the Whitmore estate. The HOA has no standing here. Karen whispered furiously to her attorney. Then came the moment of truth. Stephanie pulled out a large, color-coded map. Your Honor, this is the official survey, stamped and recorded in 1999, As you can see, the road in question runs directly through Mr. Whitmore's property. No easement exists, no agreement, no permission, Judge. Rowley looked over the map for a long time. Finally, he looked at Karen's side. Do you have any counter documentation? Karen's lawyer hesitated. Only historical use, Your Honor, and the community's assumption of ownership over time. Judge Rowley raised an eyebrow. Assumption isn't ownership. Karen stood up suddenly. You're making a mistake. This man is dangerous. Raleigh held up a hand. Ma'am, sit down. This is a courtroom, not a neighborhood rally. The tension in the room was thick, and then he delivered his ruling. This court finds that Mr. Whitmore holds legal ownership of the land in question. The HOA's claims are dismissed. I exhaled for what felt like the first time in hours. Karen's face went white. Rowley wasn't finished. Furthermore, any attempts to challenge this ruling without new legal evidence will be considered harassment. Karen stormed out of the courtroom. Stephanie turned to me. You won. I nodded slowly. Yeah, but it doesn't feel like it's over. Because it wasn't. As we walked outside, a man ran up to us, out of breath. He shoved a folder into my hand and said, You need to see this. Karen's hiding something big. He took off before I could ask anything. I opened the folder. Inside were photos and copies of emails. Emails showing Karen secretly negotiating to sell part of the HOA's green space and claiming she owned it. Emails with dates, names, and plans for a private development deal. I looked up at Stephanie. She blinked. If this is legit, Karen's been playing a game she's not ready to lose. And that was when I knew the story wasn't ending. It was just heating up. The sun was high and unforgiving as I stood outside the courthouse, that folder still clutched in my hands. My palms were sweating, not from the heat, but from what I was reading. These emails were like a bomb wrapped in manila paper. They weren't just gossip or neighborhood drama. They were proof of something criminal. Karen had been secretly negotiating with a real estate development company called Clearview Properties to sell off a large strip of HOA-designated green space. The same space she had convinced residents was protected natural buffer between the houses and my ranch. Worse still, she had claimed personal ownership of the land in those emails, using a fake LLC as a shell. And if this was real, it meant Karen wasn't just trying to steal my land. She was trying to cash in on her entire neighborhood without telling anyone. Stephanie flipped through the pages, face tight. This is fraud, real estate fraud, wire fraud, breach of fiduciary duty. Karen could go to jail for this. She glanced up at me. Where did you say this guy came from again? I didn't. He just handed me the folder, said I needed to see it, and ran off. Stephanie's jaw clenched. This was a whistleblower. Someone inside the HOA finally cracked, and that changed everything. See, up until now, Karen's war with me had been a vendetta, a personal power grab, dressed in legal jargon. But this was corruption, the kind you don't just fight with fences and court hearings. This needed strategy. Do we take it to the police? I asked. Stephanie shook her head. Not yet. We make copies, we trace the emails, verify the LLC's ownership, and then when we're ready, we bring it to the right people. You only get one shot at exposing something this big. And we can't let Karen cover her tracks. So we got to work. Stephanie hired a digital forensic analyst to verify the email headers and timestamps. Within 48 hours, we had proof the emails were real, the LLC was fake, and Karen had even scheduled a meeting with Clearview Properties for the following week. Just 2 days After our court hearing, she was moving fast, trying to lock in the deal before her grip on the HOA slipped. But there was one problem the HOA board didn't know, and without them on our side, this whole thing could still backfire. That's when Stephanie said we need to go public carefully. If we tell the right residents what she's doing and show them the proof, the community will turn on her. So we planned it. And I made a bold move. I hosted a barbecue. Yeah, you read that right. A full-blown Texas-style neighbors burgers cookout right on my ranch, right next to the blocked road. I printed flyers and had Cole, the young man who visited me earlier, quietly distribute them in mailboxes across Maple Hills. I even put a line at the bottom of the flyer. Come see what your HOA president isn't telling you. The turnout was bigger than I expected. Dozens of residents showed up with their kids, lawn chairs, and curious expressions. I grilled hot dogs. Stephanie poured lemonade. The goats wandered the field nearby, adding charm to the tense afternoon. Then, once everyone was settled, I stood on an old wooden crate and held up the folder. I wasn't going to do this publicly, I began, but after months of lies, lawsuits, and property damage, I think you all deserve the truth. I passed out copies of the emails, the fake LLC registration, and the development agreement. I walked them through the timeline, step by step. The silence was deafening. Then someone stood up. It was Debbie, the older woman who had called me weeks ago. Karen told us the Greenbelt was protected. She made us pay higher dues for its upkeep. Another man shouted. She said it was donated landway for the kids' park. More voices rose. Disbelief turned into anger. Then Cole stepped forward holding up his phone. She's been using HOA money to hire private consultants. Look, I found this on the expense records. He pulled up a spreadsheet showing thousands of dollars paid to a shell firm called Langley Asset Management. The crowd lost it, and right there, under the shade of an old oak tree, the Maple Hills community began to fracture. But Karen, she was already on the move. The very next morning she filed for a restraining order against me. The accusation: harassment, targeted misinformation, and inciting conflict within a peaceful neighborhood. I got the summons while fixing my tractor. I laughed. Stephanie did not. She's trying to flip the script, she said, pacing. She knows the heat is on, and now she's playing the victim. This is Karen's last weapon, legal chaos. So we fought it. I showed up to court 2 days later with over 40 residents from the HOA, all holding copies of the same evidence. The judge barely let her finish her statement before tossing the restraining order in the trash. But that's when Karen made her final mistake. She screamed in court, right in front of the judge, "He's destroying everything. You're all fools if you think I'm giving up." The judge blinked. "You just lost your case. I suggest you calm down." Karen stormed out of the courtroom again, but this time not alone. The county investigator had been sitting quietly in the back row. He followed her out with a badge around his neck. Stephanie turned to me. "It's starting there, finally, taking her seriously." But the storm wasn't over the next day. I got a message from my friend at the zoning office. "Hey, Adam, just a heads up. Clearview Properties filed a land interest claim, not on your land, but on the access road behind Maple Hills, the one people were using as a backup." I froze. They were trying to block the emergency road. Now if that went through, the HOA would have no exit, no way out, no emergency access, no deliveries, nothing. It would cut them off completely. And Karen, she was behind it. Stephanie's eyes widened. She's setting them up to need her fake development deal. If she controls the only way in or out, they'll beg her to sell part of the land. My fist clenched. She's not just corrupt, she's evil. That night I sat on my porch again, watching the moonlight bathe the fields. I was tired, bone tired, but I knew something. This wasn't just about winning anymore. It was about protecting innocent people from someone who would burn everything to the ground if it meant. She stayed queen, so I made a new plan, and it involved one thing Karen never thought I'd do. I filed for an emergency land order to revoke access to both roads until a full investigation was complete. If the judge approved it, the entire neighborhood would be completely cut off, and I'd finally have Karen right where I wanted her, at the mercy of the very community she tried to control. And that's exactly when Karen did something no one expected. She disappeared. Karen was gone. No email replies, no HOA meetings, no public tantrums, no dramatic neighborhood speeches with a megaphone. One day she was screeching in court. The next her house was dark blinds drawn, car missing. At first, people thought she was just laying low, but after 3 days of silence, even her inner circle began to whisper. Stephanie and I weren't buying the idea that she was just resting. She's not the type to rest, Stephanie muttered, scrolling through her phone. She's running, or she's hiding. I leaned back on my porch swing, sipping lukewarm coffee. What if she's trying to cover her tracks before Clearview realizes she can't deliver? Stephanie nodded. Or worse, she's already sold them. Something she didn't own, and they're coming to collect. That's when the knocks began, not on my door, but on every house in Maple Hills Clearview Properties. Sent reps to the neighborhood, well-dressed men and women in slim black suits with clipboards, talking to residents, asking about land readiness, development, support, and community alignment. Cole called me the minute they showed up. Adam, something's up. These people are talking like they already own part of the land behind the HOA. I frowned. Do they know? He said, but Karen must have promised them she did. That was the final thread unraveling. I drove into town that afternoon and spoke to my contact at the county records office. Sure enough, just a week before the court hearing, the same day Karen filed for the fake land claim against me, she had submitted purchase intent documents to Clearview for over 8 acres of HOA green space. Her signature was on every page. The problem: the HOA board never voted on it, the homeowners never approved it, and the bylaws clearly stated that any sale of common property required a supermajority vote. This was outright fraud. Stephanie wasted no time. She contacted the county prosecutor and turned over everything: the fake LLC, the purchase documents, the whistleblower emails, and now proof of unauthorized sale attempts. We're not just talking civil court anymore, she said, pacing my living room. This is going criminal. Meanwhile, the residents of Maple Hills were in chaos, with Karen gone and Clearview pressing them for development agreements. The HOA board called an emergency meeting in the community clubhouse. They asked me to come. I wasn't sure what to expect. Maybe more shouting, maybe anger, but when I walked in, the room was packed with anxious faces, parents with kids on their laps, retirees holding folders, young couples whispering. Debbie, the older woman, stood up first. Mr. Whitmore, she said loudly, we owe you an apology. I looked around, unsure what to say. We believed her. We let her tell us you were the enemy, and you were just protecting what was yours. I nodded slowly. I'm not perfect. I could have handled some things better, but Karen tried to take everything from me, and now she's trying to sell your land to the board president. A quiet man named James stood next, with Karen missing and the vice president resigning. Last night the board has voted to dissolve her leadership and appoint a temporary committee. We're also authorizing an internal audit of everything he looked down. We're scared, Mr. Whitmore, and we need your help. That hit me in the chest, because the very people who once called the cops on me were now asking me to protect them, so I stepped up together with Stephanie. I helped the new board draft emergency cease and desist letters to Clearview. We blocked the company from setting foot on any HOA property while the fraud investigation was pending. Stephanie also filed a motion to freeze Karen's accounts and seize any assets tied to the fraudulent LLC. We were finally gaining ground. Then the twist, the emergency land order I filed, the one to cut off both access roads, was approved. Stephanie called me the second she saw the ruling. It's done. No more sneaking. No more back roads. The neighborhood's officially landlocked until the investigation ends. I stood on the porch in silence. Are we really going through with it? I asked. She replied, this is the safest way to protect you and them. No deals can be made. No fake construction. No more access for Clearview. So we did it. The barricades went up on the back road first. It was an old gravel path lined with thick trees and brambles. The security team placed heavy fencing, warning signs, and cameras. By the end of the day, Maple Hills was completely boxed in, and the HOA residents, strangely, they thanked me. They called it the pause. They needed time to regroup, time to figure out what Karen had really done behind the scenes. But Clearview wasn't happy that night. One of their reps drove out to my ranch gate in a sleek black car and waited. I walked out, arms crossed. He stepped out, tall and pale, adjusting his tie. Mr. Whitmore, my name is Greg Teller. I represent Clearview Properties. I know who you are. He nodded. We just want to resolve this peacefully. Our company has already invested significant time and capital based on an agreement with Mrs. Langley. I raised an eyebrow. An agreement she had no right to make. She claimed she was the acting land trustee. He replied smoothly. She lied. He paused, then smirked. Then we'll sue the HOA. Good luck, I said, and turned away and stave off my land. The next morning, everyone woke up to news that made jaws drop. Karen had been found in Nevada. She checked into a wellness resort under a fake name, trying to lay low, but someone recognized her from a viral news story about Texas's wildest HOA drama and called it in. She was detained, held for questioning, and within 48 hours formally charged with fraud, conspiracy, and wire tampering. Stephanie called me, almost laughing. She made it all the way to Nevada just to get arrested at a spa. But things weren't over yet. We still had to untangle the mess she left behind. The legal filings, the broken trust, the damaged community. The HOA scheduled a neighborhood-wide vote to amend their bylaws, ensuring no single person could ever have that much unchecked power again. And guess what? They asked me to be part of the advisory committee to oversee the changes. I didn't say yes right away. I needed to think, because even though we'd won, it didn't feel like the end. Not yet, because just as I finally started feeling peace again, I got a letter in the mail. No return address, no stamp, just my name typed in bold black ink. Inside was a single sheet of paper, and at the bottom, a signature, Greg Teller, Clearview Legal Division, and 4 words that made my heart drop. This isn't over yet. I must have read that letter a dozen times. This isn't over yet. Short, threatening, cold, no explanation, no lawsuit, no official seal, just a direct message signed by the man who stood at my gate like a snake in a tailored suit. Greg teller. Stephanie wasn't surprised when I showed her the letter. She'd seen this kind of thing before. "This is a pressure move," she said. "They know they can't touch your land, so they're trying to rattle you. But don't take the bait." I folded the letter fully and slipped it into a file labeled Clearview Threats. But that night I couldn't sleep. I stared out at the barricaded road, watched the wind move through the trees, and listened to the quiet hum of my security lights. The goats slept peacefully in their pens, my land, my home, still standing. But I knew Greg Teller wasn't bluffing, and I was right. The next morning news broke across 3 local stations. Maple Hills, HOA, under investigation for fraud. Developer demands damages for broken agreement. Clearview had filed a $2.5 million civil suit against the HOA, claiming loss of opportunity, breach of implied contract, and public defamation based on the false sale. Karen initiated. It was bold and messy. They were dragging the entire neighborhood through the mud, naming board members, quoting documents, and even referencing my name, claiming I incited distrust and interfered with private commercial interests. Stephanie was livid there, trying to weaponize Karen's fraud to punish everyone. She snapped, "It's petty and dangerous." The HOA residents were panicked. Emails flew back and forth, emergency Zoom meetings, neighbors shouting in group chats. James, the temporary board president, called me directly. "We need your help again. We don't know how to handle this." Half the board members have never seen a court document before. I wanted to say, "No, I really did," but these weren't the same people who once accused me of being a land thief. These were moms, dads, retirees, all victims of Karen's lies. So I agreed to help on one condition. "If I do this," I told James, "we do it my way. No shortcuts, full transparency, no backdoor deals." He agreed. Stephanie and I started by forming a coalition of HOA residents, 15 people, willing to testify that they were never informed about Karen's deal with Clearview. We drafted declarations, gathered signatures, and documented HOA meeting minutes, showing the board never approved any land sale. Then Stephanie made our boldest move yet. She filed a counterclaim against Clearview, not just to dismiss their $2.5 million demand, but to sue them back for intentional interference in a homeowners association, negligent due diligence, and attempted land misappropriation. It was legal firepower they didn't see coming. Greg Teller called Stephanie personally. According to her, he chuckled and said, "You're playing a dangerous game, Miss Clean." And she replied, "So are you. Only difference is we have truth on our side." While the legal fight played out, life at the ranch went quiet for a while. No more surprise visits, no more broken fences. Even the town had begun to shift. Folks at the gas station smiled at me now. Some apologized. One woman even brought me a peach pie and said, "We were wrong about you." But peace didn't last. One evening, as I was locking the barn, I noticed something strange in the dirt near the southern fence line. Fresh tire tracks, not from a truck. These were smaller, sleeker. I followed them with a flashlight. They led to one of the newer barricades. The bolts had been loosened, not removed, not broken, just tampered with. I checked the footage from the camera. Nearby, nothing. The feed had gone black for 20 minutes. Right before sunset, someone had hacked my system. I called Stephanie, who immediately called a private cyber investigator. Meanwhile, I doubled security, new cameras, backup batteries, motion-activated spotlights. I even installed a wildlife trail cam in a tree facing the road, something no one would expect. 2 nights later, it caught something, a figure wearing dark clothes and gloves, crouching near the barricade, head down, tools in hand. The footage was grainy, but I recognized the gait. It was Greg Teller, the developer lawyer. He wasn't just threatening us in court. He was physically tampering with the barricade, likely trying to clear a path for surveyors or contractors. Stephanie forwarded the footage to the sheriff and the county prosecutor. "This is it," she said. "Now they're trespassing. We're filing for criminal charges." But while we prepared, that a storm was brewing inside Maple Hills. You see, Clear View's civil suit had scared some residents, especially the wealthier ones. One man, Brent Jacobs, organized a petition to negotiate peace with the developers. His idea: reopen talks, offer limited land access, and apologize to avoid legal costs. He got 18 signatures in 2 days. It was enough to force a special vote in the HOA, and if they won, they could overturn the board's temporary freeze on Clearview dealings. When Cole told me, I felt sick. After everything, they were still tempted to fold. Stephanie and I decided to make one last stand. We printed flyers, held meetings, shared the surveillance footage of Greg at the barricade. We didn't yell, we didn't threaten, we just told the truth and reminded them that backing down meant giving up everything Karen lied about. And on voting day, the neighborhood showed up. Nearly every household cast a ballot, and when the results came in, it wasn't even close. 74-19 in favor of cutting all ties with Clearview, in favor of supporting the counter-lawsuit, in favor of defending the land and their rights. James cried when he read the results aloud. I didn't. I just sat in the back of the room watching a community finally take back control. The next morning, Clearview's case was formally dismissed, tossed out by the judge for lack of standing and insufficient merit. Greg Teller didn't show up to court. He was reportedly on leave, but Stephanie got a tip from someone inside the legal world. Greg was being investigated for misconduct and illegal surveillance tactics. He was finished. Karen was still facing charges, still hiding behind a team of lawyers. But her empire had collapsed, and the barricades, they stayed up for a little while longer, not because we needed them anymore, but because they stood for something, a warning and a victory. Still, I knew one more chapter remained, because a month later, I got a letter from Karen's attorney, and it wasn't about court, it was about money. And the shocking demand inside it would flip everything on its head. The envelope sat on my kitchen table for hours. I didn't want to open it, not after everything, not after the barricades, the lawsuits, the betrayals, and the lies. But I finally did. It was short, formal, clean. On behalf of my client, Karen Langley, we hereby request your cooperation in the execution of a private financial agreement concerning the road segment currently owned by Mr. Adam Whitmore. In exchange for exclusive access and permanent road rights, my client is prepared to offer a lump sum of $750. I blinked. Was this real? Karen, the same woman who tried to steal my land, defame me in public, sue me, vanished to Nevada and dragged the entire HOA into a nightmare, now wanted to buy back access rights for nearly $1 million. I showed it to Stephanie. She read it 3 times, frowning harder with each pass. This is a desperate move, she finally said. Karen's trying to settle. Privately, she knows she's not winning in court, and now she's trying to save face and salvage some power. I shook my head. This doesn't make sense. She doesn't even live in the neighborhood anymore. She lost everything. What does she want with road access? Stephanie's eyes narrowed. I don't think it's about her. She's fronting for someone. I felt the chill creep. In clear view, exactly, they're probably offering her a payout to act as a third-party buyer. If you agree to this, you'll give them a legal foothold back onto your land. And that's when it hit me. The letter wasn't a truce, it was a trap. Karen was the same snake, just now in silk, instead of scales and clear view, was still behind the scenes, hoping I'd get tired, take the money, and open the door. They tried to break down for months. Stephanie leaned forward. We have 3 choices. Ignore it, respond with a counteroffer so outrageous they choke, or expose it publicly. I didn't even hesitate. Let's expose it. 2 days later, the new HOA board held an open town hall. This time, they invited the local press, Channel 7, the city paper, even a regional blog. That had covered the story. Back when Karen was first arrested, James stood at the front and read the letter aloud. Then he passed the mic to me. I stepped up slowly. I've been offered $750. Zero to reopen the road that started all of this by the same person who tried to steal it, by the same people who sent threats to my home and sued this neighborhood. I looked around at the crowd, my neighbors, now people who once saw me as a villain, but now stood beside me. This road isn't just concrete, it's history, it's legacy, it's the land my grandfather walked with me when I was 5, and no amount of money is worth handing that over to someone who never cared about it until they couldn't take it by force. A woman in the crowd clapped, then another, then the room erupted in applause. Later that night, the story went viral again. HOA Ranch hero rejects $750K buyout from disgraced President Karen Langley. Stephanie smiled when she saw it. That should be the final nail in the coffin. But still, I had one more surprise. With the road issue finally dead and the community stabilized, I decided to do something no one expected. I removed the barricades, but not for Karen and not for Clear View. I rebuilt the road with new gravel, solar-powered lights, and a wooden gate, and I gifted full shared access to the Maple Hills HOA. Under new terms, we drafted a new easement agreement, a 30-year renewable access clause, renewable only by unanimous board approval, with an annual maintenance fee, and a permanent no development clause for any commercial entity. James signed it with tears in his eyes. You didn't have to do this. I smiled. I know, but it's not about Karen anymore. It's about doing what's right. The neighborhood threw a celebration that weekend. Families barbecued on the HOA green space. Kids played tag in the open fields near my fence. Cole brought his guitar. Debbie made potato salad, and I finally slept that night with my windows open, a breeze rolling in, knowing it was over. And then, a few weeks later, Stephanie called me, laughing so hard she couldn't speak. When she finally calmed down, she said, "You're not going to believe this." "What?" I asked. Karen just filed a lawsuit against Clearview Properties. I blinked. "You're kidding." "Nope. She's suing them for breach of contract, emotional distress, and abandonment." We both burst out laughing. It was poetic. The snake had turned on the snake, but that wasn't the biggest surprise. 6 months later, I got a handwritten letter in the mail. No return address, just my name and shaky handwriting. I opened it carefully. It was from Karen. No threats, no tricks, just 3 sentences. "You beat me fair. I lost everything, but maybe I needed to. If you ever sell that land, please don't let them build on it. For what it's worth." I'm sorry I didn't respond. I folded the letter, placed it in the same file where all this madness began, and closed the drawer. And then I walked out to my porch, looked at the quiet road that once held so much conflict, and smiled because peace, real peace, had finally come to the ranch. And this time, I earned it. Where are you watching from? Let me know down in the comments, and remember, never mess with a rancher who knows the law.